Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The first time I saw bus 237 picking up those pale children at midnight, I thought my sleep medication was playing tricks on me. But when I found the faded school photo in my grandmother's attic 3 weeks later, showing those exact same faces from 1963, well, that's when I realized some roots never really end. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you will change how you see every yellow school bus that passes your house. And trust me, you'll want to hear every detail of what happened in the small town of Cedar Falls, Ohio, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why I can never sleep with my curtains open again. My name is Marcus, and I never believed in anything I couldn't explain, until I moved into my grandmother's old house on Maple Street in Cedar Falls. The place had been sitting empty for 2 years after she passed, and frankly, I needed somewhere cheap to live while I finished my master's degree in psychology at Ohio State. The house felt normal enough during the day. Built in 1954, it had that classic American charm. White picket fence, wraparound porch, oak trees that had probably watched 3 generations of kids ride their bikes down the sidewalk. But at night, something felt different. It started on my 3rd night there. I'd been working late on my thesis about sleep disorders, ironically enough, when I heard it. The distant rumble of a diesel engine. Now, Cedar Falls isn't exactly a bustling metropolis. We're talking about a town where they roll up the sidewalks at 9 p.m., where the biggest excitement is usually Mrs. Henderson's cat getting stuck in the Miller's apple tree. So, hearing a school bus at 11:47 p.m. seemed odd. I glanced out my bedroom window, and there it was. Bus 237, yellow as a sunflower, rolling slowly down Maple Street. The headlights cut through the darkness like searchlights, and I could make out the familiar black lettering. Cedar Falls Elementary District. But here's what made my stomach clench. The bus was stopping. Not just rolling through, actually stopping at the corner of Maple and Oak, right where the old bus stop used to be. The stop sign swung out with that mechanical wheeze I remembered from my own school days in Michigan. The red lights blinked their warning pattern, and then the door opened. 3 children climbed aboard. Now, I know what you're thinking. Maybe it was some kind of late field trip or summer school program But these kids, they were wrong. Even from 50 yards away, even in the dim streetlight, I could tell something was off about them. They moved too slowly, too deliberately, like they were walking through water. And their clothes looked old. Not vintage old, not retro old, but genuinely old. Like they'd been wearing the same outfits for decades. The tallest kid, maybe 10 or 11, wore a plaid shirt that looked like something from a Norman Rockwell painting. The girl behind him had on a dress with a full skirt that bounced as she walked. The kind my mother used to wear in her high school photos from the 60s. The smallest child, barely visible in the shadows, seemed to be wearing suspenders. They filed onto the bus without looking around, without the usual chatter and energy you'd expect from kids, even tired ones. Just methodical, purposeful. The door closed with a pneumatic hiss. The stop sign retracted, and bus 237 continued its route down Maple Street, disappearing around the corner towards downtown. I stood at my window for another 20 minutes, waiting for it to come back. It never did. The next morning, I called the Cedar Falls Elementary District office, talked to a very patient secretary named Dorothy, who assured me that, no, they absolutely did not run buses at midnight. No, there was no overnight field trip. And no, bus 237 had been retired from service in 1997 after a mechanical failure. "But sir," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, "we haven't used that route number since the accident back in '63. Seemed inappropriate to keep using it after what happened to those poor children. She wouldn't elaborate, no matter how politely I asked. Over the next 2 weeks, I developed what you might call an unhealthy obsession with 11:47 p.m. Every night, I'd position myself at the bedroom window with a cup of coffee and my laptop, pretending to work while actually watching the street. And every night, bus 237 would appear. Not every single night, mind you. That would have been too predictable, too easy to dismiss as hallucination or some kind of local prank. No. It followed a pattern that took me days to figure out. Tuesdays, Thursdays, and every other Saturday, the same route, the same stops, the same children. I started keeping detailed notes like the good psychology student I was. Time of arrival, always 11:47 p.m., give or take 30 seconds. Duration of stops, exactly 45 seconds each. Number of children picked up varied between 2 and 6, but always including the same 3 I'd seen that first night. The boy in the plaid shirt, the girl in the vintage dress, the small child in suspenders. And here's what really started to mess with my head. I began recognizing some of the other kids too. A boy with thick-rimmed glasses and a crew cut that looked like it belonged in an Eisenhower campaign photo. A girl with pigtails and saddle shoes. Children who looked like they'd stepped out of a 1950s television show. But it was more than their clothes. It was their movements, their posture, even the way they cast shadows under the streetlights. Everything about them seemed preserved, like they were echoes of something that had happened long ago. I tried taking photos, of course, videos on my phone, but every single image came out blurred, static-filled, as if the bus and its passengers existed on some frequency my camera couldn't quite capture. The closest I came to proof was an audio recording I made on my laptop. 23 minutes of ambient street noise, punctuated by the unmistakable sound of a diesel engine, air brakes, and the mechanical wheeze of a school bus door. When I played it back the next morning, my roommate Jake nearly choked on his cereal. "Dude, that's creepy as hell," he said, listening through my headphones. "But you know what's really weird? That engine sound? It's not from any modern bus. That's like old-school diesel, the kind they used to use in the 60s and 70s. Jake was a mechanical engineering major with a weird obsession for vintage vehicles, so I trusted his ear. "The transmission sounds wrong too," he continued, "and that door mechanism, man, they haven't made bus doors that sound like that since before we were born." That night, I decided to get closer. I waited until 11:45, then slipped out of the house and positioned myself behind the Henderson's oak tree, maybe 20 feet from the bus stop. Close enough to see details. Close enough to maybe understand what I was dealing with. At 11:47 exactly, the familiar rumble began. But this time, being so close, I could see things that had been hidden from my bedroom window. The bus itself looked wrong. The yellow paint seemed faded in some places, fresh in others, as if it couldn't decide which era it belonged to. The windows reflected the streetlight oddly, creating strange shadows that didn't match the interior. And the children. God, the children. Up close, I could see their faces clearly for the first time. Pale, yes, but more than that. They looked like photographs that had been left in the sun too long. Features that were clear but somehow washed out. Eyes that reflected light like old film cameras. The boy in the plaid shirt turned his head as he climbed the bus steps, and for just a moment, his gaze swept across the street, across the shadows where I was hiding. He looked directly at me and smiled. It wasn't a threatening smile, wasn't malicious or evil, it was just sad, lonely. The kind of smile you give someone when you haven't seen another person in a very, very long time. Then he was inside, and the door was closing, and bus 237 was continuing its route. But that smile followed me back to the house and straight into my nightmares. I couldn't let it go after that. The boy had seen me, acknowledged me, which meant whatever was happening, it wasn't just some elaborate hallucination brought on by stress and too much caffeine. The next day, I drove to the Cedar Falls Public Library and started digging through newspaper archives. If Dorothy at the school district had mentioned an accident in 1963, there had to be records. It took me 3 hours of scrolling through microfilm to find it. Tragedy strikes Cedar Falls, 6 children lost in bus accident. The headline was dated October 15, 1963. Below it, a grainy black and white photograph showed the twisted wreckage of a school bus wrapped around an old oak tree. The same oak tree, I realized with growing dread, that still stood at the corner of Maple and Oak Streets. The article was brief but devastating. Cedar Falls mourns the loss of 6 elementary students who perished yesterday evening when their school bus, number 237, skidded on wet leaves during an unexpected autumn storm. The bus, driven by Harold Grayson, 34, was completing its regular afternoon route when it lost control and struck the centuries-old oak at the intersection of Maple and Oak Streets. All passengers were killed on impact. The victims have been identified as Timothy Chen, 11, Susan Rodriguez, 9, Michael Torres, 8, Patricia Williams, 10, David Kim, 7, and Jennifer Thompson, 9. Mr. Grayson, who had driven for the district for 8 years without incident, was found unconscious at the scene and transported to Cedar Falls General Hospital, where he remains in critical condition. I kept reading, my hands shaking slightly as I scrolled through follow-up articles. Harold Grayson never recovered from his injuries, passing away 3 days later. The bus route was discontinued permanently and the families were devastated naturally. But what struck me was a small detail mentioned in one of the later articles. Several parents reported that their children's rooms remained exactly as they'd left them that morning. Homework still spread across desks. Beds still unmade from hurried morning routines, as if the kids might come home at any moment. I printed out the main article and drove straight back to Maple Street. The oak tree was still there, massive and ancient, its trunk easily 6 feet in diameter. But now, I noticed something I'd missed before. Old scars in the bark. Deep grooves that had healed over the decades but were still visible if you knew what to look for. The impact marks from bus 237. That evening, I did something probably stupid but absolutely necessary. I went to the Cedar Falls Cemetery. Finding the graves wasn't hard. They were clustered together in a section called Children's Garden, marked by small white headstones arranged in a semicircle around a bench. Each stone bore a name, birth date, and the same death date, October 15, 1963. Timothy Chen, Susan Rodriguez, Michael Torres, Patricia Williams, David Kim, Jennifer Thompson. I sat on the bench as the sun set, reading the names over and over. These weren't just mysterious children climbing onto a phantom bus. They were real kids who'd had real lives, real families, real dreams that were cut short on a rainy October afternoon 60 years ago. The boy in the plaid shirt was Timothy Chen. The girl in the vintage dress was Susan Rodriguez. The small child in suspenders was David Kim, and they'd been riding the same route, making the same stops for 6 decades. As darkness fell, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of going home to watch from my bedroom window, I walked back to the bus stop at Maple and Oak. I wanted to be there when they arrived. I wanted to, acknowledge them, maybe. Let them know that someone remembered. At 11:47 p.m., the familiar rumble began. But this time was different. This time, when the door opened and the children began to board, Timothy Chen paused on the bottom step. He turned back toward the street, toward where I stood under the streetlight, no longer hiding. "You've been watching us," he said, and his voice sounded like it was coming from very far away, even though he was less than 10 feet from me. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Are you going to ride with us tonight?" Susan Rodriguez asked from behind him. Her question was innocent, curious, the way any 9-year-old might ask a grown-up about joining their game. And that's when I understood. They weren't trapped, weren't suffering. They were just continuing, going through the motions of a routine that death had interrupted but never quite ended. "Where does the bus go?" I asked. Timothy smiled that same sad, lonely smile I'd seen before. "Home," he said simply. "We go home." I didn't ride the bus that night. Something held me back. Maybe self-preservation, maybe just the knowledge that some journeys aren't meant for the living. But I started talking to them. Every Tuesday, Thursday, and alternate Saturday, I'd wait at the bus stop, and every time they'd pause before boarding to chat for a few minutes. Simple conversations about simple things. Timothy told me about the model airplane he'd been building in 1963, how he'd almost finished it before the accident. Susan talked about her cat, Whiskers, and wondered if cats could live for 60 years. David, the youngest, mostly just listened with wide eyes and occasionally asked if I knew any good knock-knock jokes. They were still children, you see. Death hadn't changed that fundamental part of who they were. Through these conversations, I learned more about their routine. Bus 237 picked them up from the stops they'd been waiting at on October 15th, 1963. It drove the same route Harold Grayson had been driving that day. And at the end, well, they went home. To houses that no longer existed. To families long gone. To bedrooms that lived now only in memory. "Don't you want to rest?" I asked Timothy one night. "Don't you want to move on?" He considered this seriously, the way kids do when adults ask them big questions. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But we're scared of forgetting. If we stop riding the bus, if we stop going home, what happens to who we were? What happens to our families, our rooms, our things?" And I understood. They weren't haunting the bus route out of anger or unfinished business. They were riding it out of love. Love for the life they'd lost, for the ordinary Tuesday afternoon that had become their last day, for the simple joy of going home after school. The revelation came to me 3 weeks later, while I was researching my thesis on collective memory and trauma. I'd been reading about how communities process shared grief, about the ways people honor the dead while helping them find peace. That's when I knew what I had to do. I spent the next day driving around Cedar Falls, talking to longtime residents, asking careful questions about the 1963 accident. What I discovered broke my heart and gave me hope at the same time. Mrs. Patterson, who'd lived on Maple Street for 70 years, remembered Timothy Chen's mother lighting a candle in her window every night for 3 years after the accident. She said it was so Timothy could find his way home if he was lost. Mrs. Patterson told me with tears in her eyes. Mr. Rodriguez, Susan's younger brother, now in his 60s, still kept his sister's room exactly as she'd left it. "Mom made me promise," he said simply. Said Susan might need her things someday. David Kim's family had moved away years ago, but they'd left behind a small garden in their old backyard. Neighbors had maintained it for decades, planting new flowers each spring because David had loved helping his grandmother tend her roses. These families, this community, had been keeping vigil for 60 years, holding space for children who would never grow up, never come home, never finish their homework or feed their cats or complete their model airplanes. But maybe it was time. The next Tuesday night, I waited at the bus stop with something new. I'd spent hours at Kinko's, printing and laminating photos I'd found in the library archives. School pictures, family portraits, candid shots from birthday parties and Christmas mornings. Images of 6 children living full, joyful lives in the months and years before October 15th, 1963. When bus 237 arrived, I was ready. "I brought you something," I told them as they gathered around the bus door. I handed each child their photographs. Timothy staring seriously at the camera in his second-grade school photo. Susan blowing out candles on her 8th birthday cake, David building a snowman with his older sister. "These are who you were," I said gently. "Not just on the day you died, but every day you lived. Your families remember. The whole town remembers. You don't have to keep riding the bus to prove you existed. We know you did. We've never forgotten." For a long moment, the only sound was the idle rumble of the bus engine. Then Susan smiled. Not the sad, lonely smile I'd grown accustomed to, but a real smile. Bright and genuine and full of the joy that 9-year-olds carry like sunlight. "My mom kept lighting the candle," she whispered, looking at a photo of her family's living room window. Timothy nodded slowly, running his thumb over his school picture. "She wanted me to find my way home." "You did find your way home," I told them. "You've been home all along. In every story your families tell about you. In every flower planted in David's garden. In every model airplane kit that makes someone think of Timothy. In every cat named Whiskers that makes someone remember Susan." The bus door began to close, but this time the children didn't board. They stood on the sidewalk, clutching their photographs, as bus 237 pulled away from the curb. I watched its taillights disappear around the corner, and somehow I knew Harold Grayson was finally completing his route, finally going home himself. "Thank you," Timothy said simply, and then, one by one, they began to fade. Not disappearing, transitioning. Like photographs being gently developed in reverse, their edges softening until they became part of the warm October night. The last thing I saw was David's smile as he waved goodbye. I still live in my grandmother's house on Maple Street. I still look out my bedroom window at 11:47 p.m. sometimes, but bus 237 never returns. The route is finally complete. The strange thing is, Cedar Falls feels different now. Lighter somehow, as if the whole town has been holding its breath for 60 years and can finally exhale. Mrs. Patterson stopped lighting candles in her window, but she still waves at the oak tree when she passes. Mr. Rodriguez turned his sister's room into a beautiful memorial space where neighborhood kids can come to read. And David's garden blooms brighter than ever, tended now by volunteers who leave fresh flowers every Tuesday. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. If those children were happy riding their eternal route, going home night after night to families made of memory and love. But then I remember Timothy's smile when he saw his school picture. Susan's joy at learning her mother had never stopped waiting. David's peaceful wave goodbye. They weren't trapped by death. They were held by love. And maybe that's all anyone really needs to find their way home. But here's what still keeps me awake some nights. Last Thursday, I swear I heard another bus. Different engine, different route. And when I looked out my window, I could have sworn I saw children waiting at the corner of Pine and Elm. Different children, different clothes, different era. Because Cedar Falls is an old town, and sometimes love holds on longer than it should. What do you think happened to those children I saw last Thursday? Have you ever noticed something that shouldn't be there, hiding in plain sight in your own neighborhood? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories from Cedar Falls, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because trust me, this town has more secrets than you might expect. Sweet dreams. Story number 2. The woman in my dream last night knew exactly where to find the spare key under the ceramic frog by the porch steps. The problem is, I've never owned a ceramic frog, and I've never lived in a house with porch steps. But when I woke up this morning, I could still feel the cold metal against my fingertips, could still smell the musty scent of rain-soaked concrete. What if I told you that the dreams you think are yours might actually belong to someone else entirely? What if every night you're not just sleeping, you're living through fragments of another person's life? And what happens when those fragments start bleeding into your waking world? Stay with me, because what I'm about to share will make you question every dream you've ever had. My name is Sarah Chen, and I've always been a light sleeper. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, you learn to tune out the sound of rain against your bedroom window, the distant hum of traffic on Interstate 5, the occasional argument from the apartment next door. But lately, I've been sleeping deeper than I ever have in my 32 years of life. And that's when the dreams started getting weird. It began 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday night. I remember because I just finished binge-watching The Office for probably the 10th time, and I fell asleep with my laptop still warm on my chest. The dream felt so ordinary, so mundane that it almost felt real. I was standing in a kitchen I'd never seen before, avocado green appliances, the kind you'd find in a house built in the 1970s. There was a coffee mug on the counter, white ceramic with a chip on the handle, and I knew, somehow, I just knew, that it belonged to someone named Margaret. The knowledge sat in my mind like it had always been there, comfortable and unquestioned. In the dream, I reached for the mug with the familiarity of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. I could feel the rough edge of the chip against my thumb, could smell the lingering scent of Maxwell House coffee that had been brewing in that kitchen for decades. When I woke up, I could still taste it. That bitter, slightly burnt flavor that I'd never actually experienced, because I'm strictly a Starbucks girl. Always have been, I shrugged it off. Dreams are weird, right? Everyone knows that. Your brain just cobbles together random memories and sensations, creating these bizarre nighttime movies that rarely make sense in the morning light. But then it happened again. The next night, I was walking through a Safeway in what felt like a small town somewhere. The linoleum floors were that speckled pattern you see in older grocery stores, and I could hear the buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. I was looking for something specific, cat food, fancy feast, salmon flavor, because that's what Whiskers preferred. Here's the thing, though. I don't have a cat. I'm allergic. Always have been. But in that dream, I could feel the weight of concern for this orange tabby named Whiskers, could remember exactly which aisle the pet food was in, could even recall the way the store manager, Bill, always wore his name tag slightly crooked. I woke up with my nose stuffy and my eyes watering, like I'd actually been around cats all night. That's when I started paying attention. The dreams continued, night after night, each one more vivid and detailed than regular dreams had any right to be. I found myself living moments from someone else's life, or rather, multiple someone else's lives. There was Margaret with her chipped coffee mug and her avocado kitchen. There was whoever owned Whiskers the cat. And then there were others. I lived through a memory of learning to ride a bike in a driveway in what looked like suburban Michigan, feeling the rough concrete scrape against my palms when I inevitably fell. I experienced the satisfaction of finally nailing a tricky piano piece, Chopin's Minute Waltz. Even though I've never played piano in my life, I sat through what felt like dozens of family dinners in dining rooms I'd never seen, with people whose faces I somehow recognized but couldn't name. Each morning, I'd wake up with fragments of these lives clinging to me like cobwebs. The taste of someone's grandmother's apple pie recipe. The muscle memory of how to change a tire on a 1995 Honda Civic. The emotional weight of choosing between Ohio State and University of Michigan for college. I started keeping a dream journal, writing down every detail I could remember before they faded. The leather notebook sat on my nightstand, and each morning I'd scribble frantically, trying to capture the strange intimacy of these borrowed memories. October 15th. Dreamed. I was at a high school reunion in what looked like Iowa. Knew everyone's names. Felt genuinely sad about someone named Tommy who died in Afghanistan. I've never been to Iowa. October 18th. Spent the night learning how to gut fish with someone's grandfather near Lake Superior. Could smell the pine trees and feel the wooden dock under my bare feet. Woke up knowing exactly how to hold a filleting knife. October 22nd. Had a panic attack in a Target parking lot in Phoenix. Something about my daughter starting kindergarten and not wanting to let go. I don't have children. The details were too specific, too emotionally resonant to be random neural firing. These felt like real memories, just not mine. 3 things happened that made me realize this wasn't just about weird dreams anymore. First, I found myself humming songs I'd never heard before. Not just humming. I knew all the words. Old country songs that someone's father used to play while working in his garage on Sunday afternoons. Lullabies that a young mother once sang to her baby during those exhausting 3 a.m. feedings. I'd catch myself singing along to music I was certain I'd never encountered in my waking life. Second, my grocery shopping habits changed without me realizing it. I started buying things I didn't remember putting on my list. A specific brand of laundry detergent that smelled like the kind someone's grandmother used. Ritz crackers and peanut butter, even though I've been gluten-free for years. When I got home and unpacked my bags, I'd stare at these items with a mixture of confusion and strange familiarity. Third, and this is where it gets really unsettling, I started recognizing places I'd never been. I was driving to my cousin's wedding in Salem, taking a route I'd mapped out on Google the night before. But somewhere along Highway 18, I found myself taking a different turn. Not consciously, it just felt right. Like muscle memory guiding me down a 2-lane road lined with Douglas fir trees. I ended up in a small town called Sheridan. Population 6,127, according to the weather-worn sign at the city limits. And as I drove down the main street, past the single-story buildings with their peeling paint and hand-lettered signs, I felt that same eerie recognition I'd been experiencing in my dreams. There was Mel's Diner, with its red vinyl booths and the bell that chimed whenever someone opened the door. I'd never seen it before, but I knew that the blueberry pancakes were the best thing on the menu, and that the coffee was always slightly too strong. I knew that the third booth from the window had a small tear in the seat that someone had patched with duct tape. I knew these things because I'd eaten breakfast in that diner dozens of times, in someone else's memories. I parked my car and walked into Mel's Diner, my heart hammering against my ribs. The bell chimed, just like I knew it would. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, looked up from wiping down the counter. "Well, I'll be," she said, and her voice carried that slight Oregon accent that sounds like home even when you've never heard it before. "Haven't seen you in, must be 5 years now. How you been, honey?" I stood there, frozen, because she was looking directly at me, talking to me like she knew me. I think you might have me confused with someone else," I managed to say, though my voice came out smaller than I intended. Her face creased into a puzzled frown. "Sarah? Sarah Mitchell? Don't tell me you don't remember old Betty." She laughed, but it sounded uncertain now. "Though I suppose you do look a little different. Did you change your hair?" Sarah Mitchell, not Sarah Chen. But Sarah, I mumbled some excuse about being in a hurry and practically ran back to my car. But as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was leaving something important behind. Someone important. That night, I dreamed I was 16 years old, working my first job as a waitress at Mel's Diner. Betty was training me, showing me how to balance plates on my arm, how to remember orders without writing them down. I could feel the weight of the order pad in my apron pocket, could smell the grease from the kitchen and the coffee that had been sitting on the warmer too long. In the dream, I was Sarah Mitchell. I lived with my aunt and uncle on Maple Street after my parents died in a car accident when I was 14. I was saving money for college, planning to study journalism at University of Oregon. I had a boyfriend named Jake who worked at the lumber mill, and we'd spend Friday nights at the drive-in theater, sharing a bag of popcorn and pretending to watch movies while we talked about our future together. When I woke up, I was crying. Not the confused tears of someone trying to make sense of a strange dream, but the deep, aching sobs of genuine grief. I was mourning a life I'd never lived, missing people I'd never known. I started researching. Late nights, hunched over my laptop, diving deep into genealogy websites, Newspaper archives, anything I could find about the people whose memories seemed to be bleeding into my dreams. Margaret, with the chipped coffee mug, was Margaret Kowalski, who lived in Cleveland, Ohio from 1943 to 2019. She never married, worked as a seamstress for 43 years, and was survived by her neighbor's cat, which she'd been feeding for the last decade of her life. The obituary was 3 lines long in the Cleveland Plain Dealer. The woman who'd worried about her daughter starting kindergarten was Jennifer Hassan from Phoenix, Arizona. She died in a car accident in 2018, leaving behind a 5-year-old daughter named Emma, and a husband who sold their house 6 months later because he couldn't bear to walk past Emma's empty bedroom every morning. And Sarah Mitchell, my own namesake, had died in a motorcycle accident just outside Sheridan, Oregon in 2019. She was 24 years old. The local newspaper ran a small article about it, mentioning that she'd been a popular waitress at Mel's Diner and that she'd been planning to return to college in the fall. Each person I researched had died within the last 5 years. Each one had left behind fragments of an unfinished life. I found myself visiting their graves. I know how that sounds. Creepy, obsessive, completely insane. But I had to know. I had to understand why their memories were finding their way into my sleep. Margaret's grave was in a small Catholic cemetery in Cleveland. Just a simple headstone with her name and dates, no flowers, no signs that anyone had visited recently. I stood there for an hour, waiting to feel something. Connection, recognition, anything. But there was only the October wind and the distant sound of traffic on Interstate 90. Jennifer's grave was in Phoenix, in one of those sprawling desert cemeteries where the headstones stretch out like a small city. Her husband had put a nice headstone there, black granite with gold lettering, and there were still fresh flowers. Daisies, like someone visited regularly. Probably her daughter Emma, though she'd only be 8 or 9 now. Sarah Mitchell was buried in the Sheridan Cemetery, just a few miles from Mel's Diner. Her headstone had a small engraving of a mountain bike, and someone had left a coffee cup from Mel's by the base. The coffee had long since evaporated, but I could still smell the faint scent of Maxwell House in the air. I started having the dreams every night now. Not just fragments anymore, but complete experiences. Full days lived through someone else's consciousness. I'd spend 8 hours being Margaret, feeling her arthritic hands as she struggled to thread a needle, tasting her simple dinners of canned soup and saltine crackers, experiencing her quiet satisfaction when she finished hemming a dress just right. Then I'd be Jennifer, living through the exhausting but beautiful chaos of raising a young daughter. I'd feel the weight of Emma in my arms during bedtime stories, taste the mac and cheese I'd burned while trying to answer work emails, experience the fierce, protective love that made every other concern seem trivial. And Sarah. I lived through her final months over and over. The excitement of finally saving enough money for college. The nervousness about leaving Jake and Betty and everything familiar. The last conversation with her aunt, promising to come home for Christmas. The last shift at Mel's Diner, where Betty had made her favorite blueberry pancakes as a going-away present. I was experiencing their lives, but also their endings. The memories weren't random. They were the important ones, the ones that mattered, the ones that someone might desperately want to hold on to if they knew they were running out of time. The night I figured it out, I wasn't even asleep. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the research I'd spread out like some kind of conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Newspaper clippings, printouts from genealogy sites, photos I'd found on social media pages that had been memorialized. All these women, all these lives cut short, all somehow connected to me through dreams I couldn't control. That's when I noticed the pattern I'd been missing. They'd all been organ donors. Margaret had donated her corneas. Jennifer's heart had gone to a father of 3 in Tucson. Sarah's kidneys had saved 2 people, and her liver had given a teenager in Portland a second chance at life. And 3 weeks ago, I'd gotten a kidney transplant. The kidney that was currently filtering my blood, keeping me alive, had come from a 24-year-old woman who died in a motorcycle accident outside Sheridan, Oregon. Sarah Mitchell's kidney. I sat there in my kitchen at 2 a.m., feeling the world reorganize itself around this impossible truth. Medical science would tell you that organ transplants don't work this way. Kidneys don't carry memories. Hearts don't hold on to the experiences of their previous owners. But medical science had never explained why some transplant recipients suddenly craved foods they'd never liked before. Why they sometimes developed skills they'd never had. Why they occasionally woke up from surgery with knowledge that hadn't been there before. The dreams weren't random. They weren't even really dreams. They were echoes. Fragments of memory stored in organs that had once belonged to other people, now finding their way into the minds of the recipients who'd inherited them. Margaret's corneas, now helping someone see the world through eyes that remembered 43 years of careful needlework. Jennifer's heart, beating in someone's chest while carrying the rhythm of lullabies sung to a little girl named Emma. And Sarah's kidney, filtering toxins from my blood while somehow also filtering her memories into my sleeping mind. I checked the other recipients. The patient who'd received Sarah's other kidney, the ones who'd gotten her liver. They were all having strange dreams too. I found them through transplant support groups online, people posting about vivid dreams that felt too real, memories that didn't belong to them, sudden cravings for foods they'd never eaten. One man wrote about dreaming of working at Mel's Diner, serving coffee to regulars whose names he somehow knew. A woman described dreams of riding a motorcycle through Oregon forests, feeling the wind and freedom of roads she'd never traveled. We were all carrying pieces of Sarah Mitchell, and through us, she was still living. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night, the question that gnaws at me like hunger. If Sarah's memories are living on in us, then what happens to mine when I die? What happens to the kidney she gave me, the one that's now filtering my thoughts and dreams along with my blood? And more terrifying still, what if this isn't just about Sarah anymore? What if Margaret and Jennifer and all the others are trying to tell me something? What if they're not just sharing their memories? What if they're trying to warn me? Because last night, I had a dream that felt different from all the others. I was standing in my own kitchen looking out my own window, but I wasn't alone. There were shadows moving just at the edge of my vision. Whispers and voices I recognized but couldn't place. And when I woke up, there was a coffee mug on my nightstand. White ceramic with a chip on the handle. I don't own any mugs like that. So, tell me, have you ever woken up from a dream that felt too real to be just a dream? Have you ever found yourself knowing things you've never learned? Craving foods you've never tasted? Humming songs you've never heard? Because after everything I've experienced, I have to ask, when you're lying in bed tonight, drifting off to sleep, how can you be sure that the dreams you're about to have are actually yours? And if they're not, whose life are you about to live? Whose memories are you carrying? And what are they trying to tell you? Leave a comment below if you've ever experienced anything like this, because I have a feeling I'm not the only one. And if you want to know what happened when I went back to Mel's Diner last week, well, that's a story for another night. Sweet dreams, everyone. And remember, sometimes the most ordinary moments are the ones worth holding on to forever, even if they're not your moments to hold. Story number 3. My grandmother used to say that wolves remember everything. Every scent, every footprint, every person who ever wronged them. She'd tell me this while we sat on her porch in Durango, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Her voice would drop to a whisper when she talked about the old days, about things her own grandmother had seen in these Colorado hills. But what she never told me was what happens when they learn to walk like us. I found out last winter in the mountains outside Pine Creek, and I haven't slept right since. Every creak of my apartment floor, every shadow that moves wrong in my peripheral vision, every dog that stares too long. It all takes me back to that cabin, to that night when I learned that some stories aren't just stories. If you're listening to this alone in the dark, maybe grab a blanket, lock your doors, check your windows twice, and whatever you do, don't look out your window when I tell you what I saw. Because once you know they exist, they'll know you know. Before I tell you what happened, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button. Not because I want the numbers, but because you need to hear the rest of my stories. The ones about what came after. The ones about why I can never go back to Denver. The ones about why I'm recording this from a motel room in Nevada. And why I keep finding wolf hair on my pillow. Now, let me tell you how it all started. The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and disappointment. That's what I remember most about the day I inherited Uncle Frank's cabin. December 15th, 2 months ago. The waiting room had those generic landscape paintings that every law office seems to have. Mountains and streams that looked nothing like the real Colorado wilderness. I sat there for 20 minutes, scrolling through my phone, trying to remember the last time I'd even thought about Uncle Frank. Mr. Henderson was one of those small-town lawyers who probably knew everyone's business in Pine Creek. His office was on the second floor of a building that had been there since the 1890s. You could feel the history in the creaking floorboards. He pushed his glasses up his nose and slid the envelope across his mahogany desk. His hands trembled slightly, and I wondered if it was age or something else. Your uncle was particular about who got the property, he said, clearing his throat. Left very specific instructions. Said you were the only one who'd understand. I hadn't seen Frank in 15 years. Not since that Thanksgiving when he'd shown up wild-eyed and rambling about things in the woods. I was 12 then. Thought he was the coolest person in the world with his stories about tracking animals and living off the grid. Dad had asked him to leave before dessert. Mom cried. My younger brother Jake just sat there, mashing his potatoes into paste, pretending not to notice the family falling apart. Frank had grabbed my shoulder on his way out, whispered something I'd never forgotten. They're real, Sarah. One day you'll need to know that. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Inside was a brass key, worn smooth in places like it had been worried by nervous fingers. A hand-drawn map on yellowed paper, surprisingly detailed, with landmarks labeled in Frank's distinctive handwriting. And a note, also in his hand but shakier, written by someone who was afraid. Sarah, the cabin is yours. Everything in it, everything I've collected. It's all yours now. But listen carefully, don't go there during the full moon. If you hear them walking, don't look. They remember faces. Check the basement, under the floorboards. You'll understand. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. Your father wouldn't have let me. They're getting smarter. I laughed. Actually, laughed, sitting in that lawyer's office. Classic Uncle Frank. Always the storyteller, always trying to scare us kids with tales of monsters and mysteries. But Mr. Henderson wasn't laughing. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Miss Morrison, he said slowly, your uncle came in here every month for the past 3 years. Updated his will each time. Always made sure you were still the beneficiary. Always asked if you were still living in the city. That's weird, I said, folding the map. He said the city was safer, said you should stay there, but if you did come to the cabin... He paused, seemed to wrestle with something. He said to trust the symbols, and to never, ever go into the woods alone after dark. The drive from Denver to Pine Creek took 4 hours. Would have been 3, but the snow started falling hard past Idaho Springs. My Subaru Outback handled it fine. Thank God for all-wheel drive. I'd bought it specifically for Colorado winters, though I'd never tested it on mountain roads quite like these. I stopped at a Starbucks in Georgetown. Needed caffeine for the drive ahead. The barista, a college-aged kid with gauges in his ears, noticed my map when I pulled out my wallet. "Heading up to Pine Creek?" he asked, starting my latte. "Yeah, inherited some property up there." His face changed. "Oh, be careful, okay? Lot of people go missing in those woods. Like, a lot. My roommate's cousin went hiking there last summer and..." He trailed off, handed me my drink. "Just be careful." The radio crackled with static as I climbed higher into the mountains. NPR faded first, then the classic rock station, then even the country stations turned to white noise. By the time I reached Pine Creek, I was driving in silence. Just the sound of my tires on snowy asphalt and the occasional ping of ice hitting the windshield. Pine Creek itself was barely a town. Maybe 300 people on a good day. Main Street had a general store, a diner that looked like it hadn't changed since the 50s, and a gas station that still had a mechanical pump out front. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and outsiders get noticed. I pulled into the gas station, needed to fill up before heading to the cabin. The bell above the door chimed when I entered, and the elderly attendant looked up from his newspaper. He was maybe 70. Thin, weathered face lined with years of mountain sun. His name tag said Earl. "Help you." His voice was raspy, like he didn't use it much. "Just need to pay for pump 2, I said, pulling out my wallet. "And maybe some directions. I'm looking for the Morrison place." Earl's hand froze halfway to the register. "Frank Morrison's place?" "Yeah, my uncle. He passed away last month." The old man's face went pale. He took my $20 with trembling fingers, made change without looking at me. "Miss, maybe find somewhere else to stay tonight. There's a motel about 30 miles back." "I'll be fine," I said, probably too cheerfully. "Just need to check on the property, get it ready to sell." He grabbed my wrist as I turned to leave. His grip was stronger than I expected. Desperate. "Full moon's in 3 days, he said. "Whatever you do, be gone by then. And if you hear them, if you see them walking..." He shook his head, released my arm. "Your uncle knew, that's why he stayed, to watch them, to warn people, but it killed him in the end." "What killed him?" The death certificate said heart attack. Earl laughed, a bitter sound. "Sure, heart attack? That's what they always say when they find someone in those woods. Heart attack, animal attack, exposure, never the truth. Which is..." He leaned in close. I could smell tobacco and coffee on his breath. "That sometimes the wolves walk on 2 legs. And sometimes they remember how to open doors." I left the gas station unsettled but trying to rationalize. Small mountain towns, you know? Everyone's got their superstitions, their local legends. It's part of the charm. The turnoff to Frank's cabin was almost hidden. Just a break in the pine trees marked by a rusted mailbox that said Morrison in faded letters. Someone had scratched something else below it, symbols I didn't recognize. They looked old, deliberate. The road, if you could call it that, was barely wide enough for my car. More of a trail, really. Branches scraped against the windows like fingernails on glass. The snow was deeper here, untouched by plows. My Subaru struggled in places, tires spinning for grip. 2 miles in, the trees opened up to reveal the cabin. It was smaller than I remembered from my childhood visit, but in better shape than I'd expected. Frank must have kept it up. Solar panels on the roof gleamed dully in the fading light. A neat stack of firewood under a blue tarp. Even the windows were clean. Though I noticed something odd. They all had symbols carved into the frames. The same symbols from the mailbox. I parked and sat there for a moment. Engine ticking as it cooled. The silence was absolute. No birds, no wind, just the sound of snow falling on the roof. each flake a tiny whisper against the metal. That should have been my first warning. I grabbed my overnight bag and the key, approached the front door. It was solid oak, old but well maintained. More symbols carved into the frame, and scratches, deep gouges in the wood that looked almost like claw marks, but too high up. Whatever made them would have had to be standing. I shook off the thought and unlocked the door. The inside of the cabin was like stepping back in time, but also stepping into someone's obsession. Every wall was covered in maps, photographs, newspaper clippings. Red string connected pins like some detective's evidence board. But this wasn't about solving crimes, it was about tracking something. The main room served as living area, kitchen, and research center apparently. Frank had converted the dining table into a workspace. Journals stacked 3 deep, cameras, both digital and old film models. Recording equipment, a police scanner still crackling with occasional chatter, and books. So many books. Titles about cryptozoology, Native American legends, wolf behavior, human psychology. But it was the photographs that made my skin crawl. Hundreds of them. Pinned to the walls, scattered on the table, filed in boxes. Blurry shots of tree lines at dusk. Shadows between pines that didn't match any trees. Footprints in snow with measuring tapes beside them for scale. And in some of them, shapes that didn't quite make sense. Too tall to be wolves, too wrong to be human. One entire wall was dedicated to what Frank had labeled transformation sequences. These were clearer, taken with a telephoto lens from a distance. They showed, God, I don't even know how to describe it, a wolf standing in a clearing, but in each subsequent photo, taken seconds apart according to the timestamps, it was changing, rising up, joints bending in ways that made my stomach turn, the spine elongating, the skull shifting. By the last photo, it wasn't a wolf anymore. It was something else, something that stood upright, something that had hands instead of paws, but still covered in fur, still with those yellow eyes. One photo was circled in red marker, dated just 2 weeks before Frank died. A note beside it in his handwriting. Finally got proof. Too close this time, they saw me. It showed a clearing in the snow. In the center were footprints. They started as wolf tracks. 4 legs, proper spacing, then gradually changed. The spacing got wider. The front paws seemed to shift, spread out, develop individual digits. By the edge of the frame, they looked almost like bare human feet. Almost. I found Frank's journal on the kitchen table, like he'd left it there for me specifically. A sticky note on top said, "Sarah, start here." The journal was leather-bound, expensive, the kind you'd use for something important. I opened it to the first entry, dated January 2020. They're back, the pack that killed those hikers in 08. I'm sure of it. The alpha has the same scar across its muzzle. But something's different. They're not acting like wolves anymore. They're studying us. Learning. I flipped forward, scanning entries. March 2020. Found evidence of tool use. Sticks arranged to prop open a trap. Rocks piled to create steps up a cliff face. This isn't normal wolf behavior. July 2020. Heard them trying to speak last night. Just mimicry at first, echoing bird calls. But then I heard something that sounded almost like words. Guttural, primitive, but intentional. October 2020. They can stand upright for minutes at a time now. Saw one examining its own paws in the moonlight, spreading the digits like it was amazed by its own transformation. December 2020. I think they remember me from when I shot one in 08. They leave things at my door, bones arranged in patterns, dead rabbits laid out in rows. Messages? Threats? I don't sleep anymore. The last entry was dated December 1st, 2 weeks before he died. They're getting bolder, came right up to the porch last night, stood there for hours, just watching. I could see their breath fogging the windows, 5 of them, all standing upright. Their eyes reflect different than regular wolves, more yellow, more knowing. The alpha tapped on the window, deliberate. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause. It was counting. I think they remember me from 08, the winter I shot one. It didn't die right away, dragged itself into the woods screaming. I followed the blood trail but lost it in a blizzard. It screamed, Sarah. When the bullet hit, it screamed like a man. I buried what I thought was a wolf that winter. Marked the spot with river stones. Sometimes I wake up and the stones are moved, arranged in patterns. Messages maybe, or warnings. If something happens to me, if Sarah gets this place, she needs to know they're real, they're patient, and they never forget. Check the basement. Under the floorboards beneath the water heater. I've hidden the most important evidence there. The stuff that proves what they really are. They're not werewolves, not shapeshifters. They're something else. Something that learned to change, something that's still learning. I can hear them outside now, scratching at the walls. They're trying the doorknob again, getting better at it. God help us if they ever figure out locks. My hands were shaking as I set the journal down. Outside, the sun was already starting to sink behind the mountains. In December, darkness comes early and stays late. The temperature was dropping fast. I could see my breath in the cabin despite the insulation. I found the basement door in the kitchen, painted the same color as the walls like Frank had tried to hide it. The stairs were narrow, steep. I used my phone's flashlight to navigate down into the musty darkness. The basement was small. More of a root cellar, really. Concrete walls sweating with moisture. A water heater in the corner, just like Frank had written. I knelt beside it, feeling along the floorboards until I found a loose one. Underneath was a metal box, military surplus from the look of it. Waterproof. Locked, but the key from the envelope fit perfectly. Inside were more photographs, but these were different, clearer, more horrifying. They showed wolves mid-transformation. Close-ups of paws becoming hands, skulls elongating, spines straightening, and in one, a wolf's eye changing, the pupil shifting from round to vertical to human. But it was the last item that made me gasp. A DNA test result from a lab in Denver. 2 samples compared, one labeled wolf blood, Pine Creek specimen, the other labeled human blood, F. Morrison. The results showed a 12% match. Impossible for normal wolves and humans. We share less than 2% of our DNA with them, but these samples, they showed markers I didn't understand. Anomalies highlighted in yellow. Notes in the margin in Frank's writing. Genetic drift, horizontal gene transfer, impossible, but here it is. A sound from upstairs made me freeze. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Too heavy for any animal. The doorknob rattled. I'd locked it. I was sure I'd locked it. The rattling stopped. Then came a sound that made my blood run cold. Knocking. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Pause. Just like Frank had described. I grabbed the box and crept back up the stairs, pausing at the top to listen. The knocking had stopped. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. I peered around the corner into the main room. Nothing seemed disturbed, but through the window, I could see shapes moving in the trees. Shadows that stood too tall, that moved too deliberately. The fireplace still had dry wood in it. I got it going as full darkness fell. The crackling flames the only sound in that oppressive silence. I made instant coffee on the camp stove. Bitter and too hot, but I needed the caffeine. Needed to stay alert. I settled in with more of Frank's journals, learning about his years of observation, how the pack had grown bolder, smarter, how they'd learned to use simple tools, how their vocalizations had become more complex, more like language. That's when I heard the first howl. It started low, so low I felt it in my chest before I heard it. A vibration in the air. Then it climbed, higher and higher until it didn't sound like any wolf I'd ever heard. It sounded wrong, like something trying to remember how to be a wolf, like an actor who'd forgotten their lines. Then came the response, from the opposite direction. Another howl, then another, different pitches, different tones. They were communicating, coordinating. They were surrounding the cabin. I turned off the lamp, leaving only the firelight. The dancing shadows made everything worse, made me see movement where there wasn't any. Or was there? I pressed myself against the wall next to the window and carefully, so carefully, peered out through the curtain. The snow glowed blue in the moonlight. Everything was still. Perfect, like a photograph. Then I saw movement at the tree line. They emerged slowly, deliberately. At first, they looked like normal wolves. Gray fur matted with snow, 4 legs moving with that fluid grace predators have, yellow eyes reflecting the moonlight. But as they got closer to the cabin, something changed. The first one to change was the biggest, the alpha, I guess. The one with the scar across its muzzle that Frank had written about. It stopped about 50 feet from the porch and sat. Just sat there in the snow like it was waiting for something. Like it was preparing. The others arranged themselves in a semicircle behind it. 7 in total. All watching the cabin, all perfectly still. Then the alpha tilted its head back and, God, I'll never forget this. It started to stand up, not like a dog doing a trick, not like a bear rearing up to intimidate. This was different. Deliberate. I could hear the bones popping even through the window, like knuckles cracking but deeper, wetter, its spine elongated with a sound like rope being stretched. The front legs, they bent in ways that made my stomach turn. Joints reversing, lengthening. The paws, they spread, stretched, digits separating. Within maybe 30 seconds, it wasn't on 4 legs anymore. It stood there on 2 legs, still covered in fur, still with a wolf's head, but standing like a man, 7 feet tall at least. Its arms, because that's what they were now, hung at its sides. Too long, the proportions all wrong, but unmistakably purposeful. The others followed. One by one, they rose up. A pack of things that shouldn't exist, things that violated everything I thought I knew about biology, about evolution, about reality. They stood in their semicircle, just watching. Steam rose from their muzzles in the cold air. Their eyes never blinked, never looked away from the cabin. Then the alpha did something that made me bite my hand to keep from screaming. It walked to the window, not prowled, not stalked. Walked, with deliberate measured steps, like it was remembering how, like it was practicing. Each footfall careful, calculated, human. It pressed its face against the glass, and I swear to God, it smiled. Not a dog's pant or a wolf's snarl. A human smile with too many teeth. A smile that understood what it was doing, that knew I was watching. Its breath fogged the window. And in that fog, it drew something with one elongated claw. A circle, then a dot in the center. An eye. They remember faces. Frank's warning echoed in my head as I pressed myself flat against the wall, praying it hadn't seen me. But deep down, I knew it had. They all had. The alpha stepped back from the window, tilted its head like it was thinking. Then it spoke. Not words, not quite, but sounds that were almost words, like someone with a mouthful of marbles trying to talk. Guttural, wet, but undeniably an attempt at speech. S, ah, r, ah, my name. They were trying to say my name. How did they know my name? I scrambled for Frank's journals, flipping through pages with shaking hands. Found it. An entry from November. They got into the mailbox today. Scattered the mail across the yard, but they looked at each piece. studied it. The Alpha held an envelope up to the light for minutes. My utility bill, my name printed clearly. They're learning to read. Oh God, they could read. They knew who I was. Knew I was Frank's niece from the mail, from the will paperwork that had probably been sent here. The scratching started then. At the door first. Testing, probing. Then the windows, all around the cabin. Scratching, tapping, and those almost words getting clearer. Sarah, come, see. Frank, gone, now, you. I found Frank's rifle in the closet. An old Remington, loaded, safety off. I checked all the windows, all the doors. The symbols carved into the frames seemed to glow in the firelight. Were they protection? Warnings? The pack circled the cabin for hours, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes dropping back to 4, testing every entrance, every weakness, and their vocalizations grew more complex, more conversations than calls. I could hear them discussing, planning. At one point, one of them tried the doorknob, just reached out with those wrong fingers and turned it. The lock held, but the fact that it knew how to try. I did the only thing I could think of. I built up the fire, grabbed every piece of furniture I could move, and barricaded the doors and windows. The kitchen table against the front door, the bookshelf against the back, chairs wedged under doorknobs. Then I found the basement entry from 2008, the year Frank shot one of them. December 3rd, 2008. Took Sarah hiking today. My 12-year-old niece up for Thanksgiving. Smart kid. Brave, maybe too brave. Her parents don't know I brought her here. They think we went to the tourist trails. We saw the pack near Crystal Lake, 5 of them. Normal wolves, I thought. But Sarah noticed something. Uncle Frank, why is that one standing up? I looked where she was pointing. The big gray one, the Alpha. It was on its hind legs, just for a moment. Watching us. Watching her, its eyes. They were too intelligent, too aware. Sarah wanted to get closer, take pictures with her little disposable camera. I held her back, but not before the Alpha saw her. Really saw her. It stared at her for so long, like it was memorizing her face, burning it into memory. Later, she said something that chilled me. It looked like it recognized me, Uncle Frank, like it knew me from somewhere. I told her it was just the shadows, tricks of light. But we both knew I was lying. That night, I heard them around the cabin, more than usual, calling to each other, and I swear I heard them trying to say her name. Oh God, they remembered me. From 15 years ago. They remembered a 12-year-old girl who'd seen something she shouldn't have. Who'd seen them when they were still learning. Still changing. The scratching at the doors grew more insistent. The not-quite words got clearer. Sarah, remember. Us? Come, see what we became. Then I heard them on the roof. Footsteps. Careful. Testing. They'd figured out the chimney. Of course they had. I aimed the rifle at the fireplace and waited. Sparks flew as something blocked the top of the chimney. Snow fell into the fire, hissing. Then a face appeared, upside down, covered in fur but with human eyes. Intelligent eyes. Knowing eyes. It smiled at me, spoke one perfect word. Hello. I fired. The sound was deafening in the small space. The face vanished. Something screamed. That half-human scream Frank had described. Liquid dripped down the chimney, blood, black in the firelight. But they didn't leave. They got angry. The assault on the cabin intensified. They threw themselves against the doors, clawed at the walls, and their voices became a chorus, all of them trying to speak, trying to convince me. Sarah, don't fight. We remember you. Join the pack. Frank is with us. That last one made me freeze. Frank is with us? What did that mean? I got my answer when one of them came to the window, different from the others. Newer, somehow. Less practiced in its movements. It pressed against the glass, and in the firelight I could see its face clearly. It was Frank. Not exactly Frank, but something wearing an approximation of his face, like it had tried to copy him but couldn't get the details right. The bone structure was there, the gray in the fur that looked like his beard, but the eyes were still wolf yellow, the teeth too sharp, the proportions wrong, but it was him, somehow, some way. "Sarah?" This time the word was perfect, clear in Frank's voice. "Don't you recognize family?" I understood then. The wolf he'd shot in 2008, the one that screamed like a man. He'd said he buried it. But what if it wasn't dead? What if it had changed him somehow, infected him? What if the 12% DNA match wasn't from contamination, but from transformation? What if Uncle Frank hadn't died of a heart attack, but had become one of them? The thing wearing Frank's almost face pressed a hand, a paw against the window, left bloody prints on the glass. "Join us, Sarah. We've waited so long. The pack remembers. The pack remembers everything." "You're not Frank," I whispered. "No, and yes. Frank fought. Frank lost. Frank changed. Now, Frank is more. You killed him. No, transformed, elevated, evolved." The words came easier now, like talking was helping it remember. "He hunted us. We showed him. Truth. Now, your turn." The others joined him at the window, a gallery of nightmares, all walking upright, all staring with those intelligent eyes. And I realized some of them looked familiar too, features that were almost human, almost recognizable. How many hikers had disappeared in these woods? How many had been transformed? "The moon," the Frank thing said. "Full moon, tomorrow. Best time for change. Less painful, more complete." They were going to wait. Wait for the full moon. Wait for me to get tired, get careless, make a mistake. I couldn't let that happen. I stayed awake all night, fed the fire, watched the windows. The pack eventually retreated to the tree line, but I could still see their eyes, glowing, watching, waiting. As the first pale light of dawn touched the mountains, they began to change back. The process was just as horrifying in reverse. Bones cracking, spines compressing. The Frank thing was the last to change, looking at me with those yellow eyes until the very end. Then they melted back into the forest. But I knew they'd return. I didn't wait for full daylight. As soon as they were gone, I grabbed Frank's journal, the box from the basement, and a bag of supplies. The rifle, too. Then I ran for my car. The engine turned over on the third try. Thank God, I threw it in reverse, didn't even bother turning around. Just gunned it backwards down that narrow road. Branches scraping, tires slipping on fresh snow. I made it almost a mile before I saw them. They were following, but not like wolves hunt. They were walking, upright, in a line, patient, deliberate, knowing I could only go so fast on that winding road. The speedometer hit 40, dangerous for driving backwards on an icy mountain road, but I could see them gaining, not running, just walking faster than any human should be able to walk, their legs too long, their strides too perfect. That's when my tire blew. The car spun. I caught a glimpse of them in my headlights, closer than I'd thought. Their eyes reflected gold in the beams. Human eyes in wolf faces on human bodies. The car slammed into a snowbank. The engine died. In the sudden silence, I could hear them approaching. Measured footsteps in the snow. I did the only thing I could. I grabbed the rifle and ran into the woods. You know how in nightmares you can never run fast enough? This was worse, because it was real, because I could hear them behind me, not pursuing like predators, following like they had all the time in the world. "Sarah," Why, run. Come back to us. The change is beautiful. Frank wants to show you. The voices were clearer now, more human, like they were remembering how to speak with each step, like the chase was helping them transform. I stumbled through the trees, no idea where I was going. Just away, always away. The snow was knee-deep in places. My lungs burned with the cold air. My legs screamed with exhaustion. Then I saw it, a ranger station. Old and abandoned, but intact. I crashed through the door and barricaded it with everything I could find. An old desk, filing cabinets, anything heavy, through the broken windows. I watched them emerge from the tree line. They circled the station, but something was different. They seemed hesitant, unsure. That's when I noticed the symbols carved into the doorframe. Native American. Protective wards. Whatever they were, the pack wouldn't cross the threshold. The Frank thing approached the window. In the morning light, I could see its features more clearly. More human now, more familiar, but still wrong, still other. Sarah, the voice was perfect now, completely Frank's. You can't stay there forever, and we have all the time in the world. We've learned patience. We've learned to wait. What are you? I asked. It tilted its head, smiled that too wide smile. Evolution. The next step, humans who learned from wolves, wolves who learned from humans, the best of both, the future. You're monsters. No, we're family. You're family now. Frank understood, in the end. The pack is everything. The pack remembers. The pack protects its own. Frank would never. Frank shot one of us. Killed what he thought was just a wolf. But we're more than that. We've been more for so long. Since before your cities. Before your civilization. We've been watching, learning, waiting. For what? For the right time. For enough of us. For humans who could understand. Who could join willingly. The forced changes, they're imperfect. Painful. But those who choose, they become perfect, like us. It pressed its hand against the window, almost human, almost. The full moon tomorrow. Choose then. Transform willingly. Or we take you anyway. But willing is better. Willing preserves more of you. They stayed for hours, circling, waiting, trying to convince me, sometimes in Frank's voice, sometimes in others. Voices I didn't recognize. Hikers, hunters, all the missing people from these mountains over the years. As darkness fell again, I knew I had one chance. The full moon was rising. They seemed distracted by it, restless. Some were howling, that terrible half-human sound. Others were changing, becoming more wolf than man, like the moon pulled them in different directions. I found a back window they couldn't see, slipped out while they were focused on their transformations. Ran like I've never run before. Found the main road by pure luck. Flagged down a truck driver who took one look at my face and drove me straight to Denver without asking questions. I never went back for my car. Never reported what happened. Who would believe me? But I kept Frank's journals, his photos, his evidence, and I started researching, found others online. People with similar stories, similar encounters. There are more packs out there, more than anyone knows. They're spreading, learning, evolving. And here's the thing. Here's why I'm telling you this story. Last week, I started finding photographs under my apartment door. Old ones. Of me as a child. Of Frank. Of places I've been recently. My office, my gym, the coffee shop I go to every morning. And footprints in the snow outside my window. Footprints that start as wolf tracks and end as bare human feet. They found me. They remember. And last night, I heard my neighbor's dog barking, frantic, desperate. Then suddenly, silence. This morning, my neighbor mentioned that Brutus seemed different. Wouldn't eat his kibble. Kept trying to stand on his hind legs. kept watching her with eyes that seemed too knowing. She laughed about it. Said maybe he was trying to evolve, said it like a joke, but I saw him through her window. Saw the way he tilted his head, the way his paws spread against the glass, the way he smiled. They're not just changing wolves anymore. They're changing our pets, our companions, the animals we trust. I'm leaving Denver tomorrow, going somewhere warm, somewhere without mountains, without snow, without wolves. Phoenix maybe, Las Vegas, somewhere bright and loud and full of people. But I know it won't matter, because my grandmother was right. Wolves remember everything. And now, so do you. So, before you fall asleep tonight, before you dismiss this as just another story, do me a favor. Check your windows. Look for footprints in the snow. Listen for howls that sound almost like words. Watch your pets. Watch how they move, how they watch you. And if you see a wolf standing upright in your yard, if you hear scratching at your door, if you find photographs you don't remember taking, don't let them see your face, don't listen to their words, don't trust the familiar voices. Because once they know, you know. Once you've seen them for what they really are, they never forget, they never stop hunting. And they're very, very patient. I can hear something outside my motel room door right now. Scratching, sniffing, testing the lock. It's been there for an hour, just waiting. The voice sounds like Frank, sounds like home, sounds like family. Sarah, open the door. It's time to come home. The pack is waiting. The pack remembers. The pack loves you. But I know better now. That's not Frank. That's something wearing his voice. Something that learned to be him, something that wants me to join them. The moon is full tonight. I can feel it pulling at something inside me, something that wasn't there before, something that's been growing since that night in the cabin. Maybe they don't need to bite you. Maybe just being near them, breathing the same air. Maybe that's enough. Maybe the change has already started. My hands look different in the moonlight. Longer, the fingers spreading wider than they should. And the dreams, God, the dreams, running through snow on 4 legs, the taste of iron in my mouth, the joy of the pack, the freedom of the change. I'm fighting it, writing the story to keep myself human, to remember what I am, who I am, but it's getting harder, so please, if you're still listening, still human, remember my story, share it, tell others. Warn them about the wolves that walk on 2 legs, about the pack that remembers, about the change that's coming, and if you ever meet someone named Sarah Morrison, if she knocks on your door during a full moon, if her eyes reflect yellow in the light, if her smile has too many teeth, don't let her in. That won't be me anymore. That will be something else, something that remembers being me, something that wears my face and speaks with my voice. Something that belongs to the pack. The scratching has stopped. The voice has gone quiet. But I know they're still there, waiting. They have all the time in the world. The moon is so bright tonight, so beautiful, calling to me, calling me home. Maybe Frank was right. Maybe the change is beautiful. Maybe being part of the pack, remembering everything, living forever in the mountains. Maybe that's better than this fear, this running, this loneliness. Maybe I should open the door. Maybe I should go home. Maybe I should, no, I'm still me, still human, still fighting. But for how long? Subscribe to my channel, please. Follow my story, because one way or another, this is just the beginning. Either I'll keep running, keep documenting what they are, or I'll become one of them. Either way, you need to know, you need to be ready, because they're spreading. City by city, town by town, and they're getting better at pretending to be us. Better at hiding in plain sight. Your neighbor, who works nights and sleeps all day. Your dog walker, who seems to understand animals too well. Your coworker who brings rare steaks for lunch and stares too long. They could be anyone, anywhere. And once they know you've noticed, once they know you suspect, well, you know what happens then. Sweet dreams, listeners. Lock your doors, trust your instincts. And whatever you do, don't go into the woods alone. Don't trust the wolves. And don't, whatever you do, don't look for the Pine Creek cabin. It's theirs now. All of it. The whole mountain. Their territory, their hunting ground, their home. But sometimes, on quiet nights, when the moon is dark and the snow falls silent, I wonder if I should go back. Wonder if the pack is still waiting. Wonder if Frank is still there, wearing his almost human face. Waiting for his niece to come home. Waiting for me to understand. Waiting for me to choose. The scratching at the door has started again. Gentle now, patient. Like they know I'm weakening. Like they can smell my doubt. Sarah? Frank's voice, perfect now, warm, kind. We miss you, the pack misses you. Come home. Come run with us. Come be free. I should end this story, upload it, share it, warn everyone. But the moon is so bright, and I'm so tired of running. And Frank sounds so much like himself. Maybe I'll just peek through the door, just to see, just to know for sure. What harm could that do? What's the worst that could happen? After all, they already know my face. They already remember me. I'm already part of their story. Maybe it's time to stop fighting fate. Maybe it's time to go home. Maybe it's time to... Recording ends. Note found attached to file. This story was uploaded automatically at 3:47 a.m. MST. Sarah Morrison has been reported missing from her motel room in Nevada. The door was found open. Wolf tracks led away into the desert. But halfway across the parking lot, they became human footprints. She has not been found. If you see her, if you meet her, remember, that's not Sarah anymore. That's something else. Something that remembers being her. Don't trust the face. Don't trust the voice. And whatever you do, don't follow her into the woods. Remember to subscribe. Share this story. The truth needs to be known. They walk among us. They remember everything. And they're always recruiting. Listen. The whispers and make a decision whether we are going to cooperate with the whispers or we just want to skip them. But actually, no one can skip these whispers. If you walk away from them, they will run towards you until they reach you. They confront you, make you pay, make you suffer the same thing they suffer. There is no escape from them. If you want to escape, help them, so they can have peace, and you also can have it. Help, or you will ask for help soon. So, the end of today's video has arrived. Share your personal horror experiences in the comments. Also, comment the part of the story that you find the most horror and terrifying. If you like this video, leave a like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Also, ring the bell icon so you don't miss the upcoming videos. Remember, don't run from whispers, because they follow you. They know you. They want you to listen, just confront them. Now, sleep well, or should I say, have a haunted night. Story number 4. The first time I saw the 13th floor button light up in my apartment building's elevator, I thought I was losing my mind. You see, my building only has 12 floors. I'd been living in the Meridian Heights apartment complex in downtown Seattle for 3 months, and I'd ridden that elevator hundreds of times. 12 floors. Always 12. The buttons went from L for lobby, then 1 through 12. Nothing else. But that Tuesday night in October, as I stepped into the elevator after my late shift at the hospital, there it was. A softly glowing 13 inches right above the 12. If you've ever felt that chill, that inexplicable wrongness when something familiar suddenly isn't, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, well, consider yourself lucky, because what I discovered on that impossible floor still keeps me awake at night, wondering if I'll ever truly escape what I found there. And now, our story begins. The elevator doors slid shut with their usual mechanical sigh, and I pressed the button for the 8th floor. My scrubs were still damp with sweat from a 12-hour shift in the ER, and all I wanted was my bed. Maybe some leftover Thai food if I hadn't eaten it already. The elevator hummed its familiar tune, that slightly off-key vibration that every old building seems to have. I leaned against the back wall, closing my eyes for just a moment. That's when I heard it. A soft ding. But we hadn't reached my floor yet. I opened my eyes to see the number display showing 13 inches in green LED digits. The doors began to slide open. "What the?" I muttered, stepping forward. The hallway beyond looked wrong, where my building had beige walls and fluorescent lighting. This floor had deep burgundy wallpaper with a pattern that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at it. The lights were dimmer, warmer, like old incandescent bulbs instead of the harsh LEDs everywhere else. The smart thing would have been to hit the close door button, to go straight to my apartment and forget this ever happened. But curiosity, that dangerous human trait, it got the better of me. I stepped out. The carpet was different too, thick and plush under my tired feet. Not the thin commercial-grade stuff on every other floor. The air smelled different, like old books and something else. Something sweet but wrong, like flowers left too long in a vase. There were only 4 doors on this floor. My building had 8 apartments per floor, but here just 4. Each door was painted black with brass numbers that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. 1301, 1302, 1303, and 1304. I walked slowly down the hallway, my hospital shoes making no sound on that thick carpet. As I passed 1301, I heard something, music, but not any music I recognized. It sounded like a music box, but the melody was backwards? No, that wasn't quite right. It was playing forward. But the notes themselves felt wrong, like they were in a key that shouldn't exist. At 1302, silence, complete and absolute, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring, that makes you aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing. 1303 had voices, soft murmuring, like a conversation heard through water. I couldn't make out words, but something about the rhythm of it made my skin crawl. It sounded like counting, but the numbers made no sense. 43, purple, yesterday, 7, blue, tomorrow. I should have left. Every instinct screamed at me to get back in that elevator, but I had to know what was behind 1304. As I approached the last door, I noticed something else. The brass numbers weren't just glowing, they were warm. I reached out, touched them gently, and jerked my hand back. They were fever hot, like touching someone's forehead when they're burning up. And then the door opened. Not all the way, just a crack. Just enough for me to see a sliver of the room beyond. And what I saw, the room was identical to mine. Same layout, same furniture placement. Even the same crooked picture frame on the wall that I'd been meaning to straighten for weeks. But everything was shifted. The colors were wrong, like looking through a filter and sitting on my couch. In my living room, that wasn't my living room. Was me. But this other me was wrong. She was too thin, her skin too pale. Like she'd been sick for months, her hair, my hair, hung limp and gray. Though I'm only 28. She was wearing the same scrubs I had on, but they hung off her skeletal frame. And then she turned, looked right at me through that crack in the door. Her eyes, my eyes, were solid black, no whites, no iris, just endless black. She smiled, and when she did, I saw her teeth were growing, not grown, but actively growing, pushing out of her gums as I watched, getting longer and sharper, and I ran. I've never run so fast in my life, down that impossible hallway, past those impossible doors. I slammed my hand on the elevator button, and miracle of miracles, it opened immediately. I threw myself inside, jabbing at the button for my floor, any floor. Just get me away from here. The doors closed. The elevator hummed, and when they opened again, I was on the 8th floor, my floor. Everything normal, everything right. I stumbled to my apartment, locked the door behind me, and slid down to sit on the floor. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but what would I say? Hey, I found a floor that doesn't exist and saw a dying version of myself with growing teeth? They'd think I'd lost it. Maybe I had. I didn't sleep that night or the next. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those black eyes staring back at me. That smile with too many teeth. 3 days passed before I had to use the elevator again. 3 days of taking the stairs, even to the 12th floor to visit my friend Marcus. 3 days of telling myself it had been exhaustion, hallucination, too many double shifts and not enough sleep. But on Friday evening, my ankle was killing me from all those stairs, and I had groceries to carry. I stood in the lobby for a full 5 minutes, watching other residents come and go, using the elevator like it was nothing, because for them, it was nothing. They didn't know. Finally, Mrs. Chen from the 4th floor took pity on me. "You okay, dear?" she asked, her wrinkled face full of concern. "You look pale." "Just tired," I managed, forcing a smile. "Come on," she said, already pressing the elevator button. "I'll ride up with you." The doors opened. We stepped in. She pressed 4. I pressed 8. The display showed normal numbers. L, 1, 2, 3, no 13. I started to relax. Mrs. Chen got off at 4 with a wave. The doors closed. The elevator continued up. 5, 6, 7. And then it happened. The number display flickered just for a second, showing 13 inches before continuing to 8. But in that split second, the elevator lurched, like hitting a pocket of air turbulence. My stomach dropped, and for just a moment, I heard it again. That backwards music box melody. The doors opened on 8. Everything looked normal. But as I stepped out, I noticed something. A smell. That same sweet, wrong flower smell. Clinging to my clothes. I made it to my apartment, put away my groceries, tried to convince myself it was nothing. But then I saw it, in the mirror by my door. For just a second, my reflection was wrong. Too thin, too pale. Black eyes staring back at me before returning to normal. That's when I started keeping a journal, writing down every time something felt off, and I began to notice a pattern. It happened most often at specific times. 3:33 a.m., 3:33 p.m., sometimes at 11:11, always repeating numbers. And it was getting more frequent. The following Tuesday, I was coming home from work around 3:30 p.m. when I met another resident in the elevator. A guy I'd never seen before. Tall and thin, with glasses and a nervous energy about him. 8, please, I said, as he was closer to the buttons. He pressed it, then hesitated. His finger hovered over the panel, and I saw his eyes track up, past 12, to empty air, but his expression, he saw something there. "Do you—" he started, then shook his head. "Never mind." "No," I said quickly. "What were you going to say?" He looked at me, really looked at me, like he was trying to decide something. Then, quietly, "Do you ever see the 13? My blood went cold. "You see it too?" He nodded, quickly, nervously. "Started about a month ago. I thought I was going crazy. I've been taking the stairs, but sometimes you have to use it." I finished. "Yeah." He adjusted his glasses. A nervous habit. "I'm Paul, apartment 1105. Jenny, 807, I replied. Have you ever gotten off there?" His face went white. Once, I can't talk about it, not here. The elevator dinged. 5th floor, his floor. As he stepped out, he turned back. If you need to talk, if you see things getting worse, 1105. But Jenny? His voice dropped. Don't go back to 13. Whatever you do, don't go back. The doors closed before I could respond. That night. I couldn't stop thinking about what Paul had said. Things getting worse. What did that mean? And what had he seen that made him so terrified? Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and made some tea. As I stood in my kitchen waiting for the water to boil, I heard it. The elevator, running. Which wasn't unusual in a big building, except I could hear it through my walls, which I'd never been able to before, and it sounded wrong, like it was moving too fast, or in the wrong direction, up and down, never stopping. I looked at my phone. 3:32 a.m. At 3:33 exactly, the sound stopped, and in the silence that followed, I heard something else. Footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate, getting closer. They stopped right outside my door. I held my breath, every muscle tense, waiting. The doorknob didn't turn. There was no knock, just breathing. Slow, raspy breathing, like someone with congested lungs. Then a voice. My voice, but wrong, hollow, empty. Let me in, Jenny. I'm so tired, so hungry. Let me in. I backed away from the door, my hands shaking. The voice continued, pleading. Please, I just want to rest. I've been walking for so long. Let me in. You're not me, I whispered. The breathing stopped. The voice changed, became angry. I am you. I'm the you that took the stairs. The you that wasn't curious. The you that lived. Let me in. Then, suddenly, silence. I stood there, frozen. For what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally. I crept to the door, looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but on the floor, right in front of my door, was a puddle of something dark. In the distorted fisheye view of the peephole, I couldn't tell what it was, and I wasn't about to open the door to find out. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, when I finally brave enough to leave, the puddle was gone, but the smell remained. Sweet, wrong, like rotting flowers. I went to see Paul that evening, knocked on 1105 with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. He answered quickly, like he'd been waiting by the door. His apartment was cluttered with papers, books, laptop screens showing architectural diagrams. You've been researching, I said, for weeks. He let me in, locked the door behind me. Coffee? Please. As he made coffee, I looked at his research, building blueprints, newspaper clippings, historical records. What is all this? The history of Meridian Heights. He handed me a mug. Did you know this building was constructed in 1962? But here's the interesting part. It was built on the site of the old Meridian Hospital. Hospital? Demolished in 1960. But before that, for 40 years, it was Seattle's primary tuberculosis sanatorium and their psychiatric ward. He pulled out an old photograph. This was taken in 1943. See anything familiar? I studied the black and white photo. It showed a large brick building, and on the side, barely visible, was an elevator shaft. They had an elevator? 13 floors, Paul said quietly. The psychiatric ward was on the 13th floor. They stopped using it in 1952 after what? He pulled out another clipping. Mass hallucination event, that's what they called it. 12 patients and 3 staff members all claimed they could see the other place, a dimension where they were dying, where they were already dead. The hospital shut down the floor, sealed the elevator. But the building was demolished, I protested. The building? Yes, but elevator shafts go deep into the foundation, into the ground. He showed me another diagram. They built Meridian Heights using the same foundation, the same elevator shaft, just capped it at 12 floors. So, you're saying what? The 13th floor is ghostly? Paul shook his head. Not ghosts, something else. I think the barrier is thin there, between our reality and others. The patients in 1952, they weren't hallucinating. They were seeing through. And now it's happening again. I finished. Paul, what did you see when you went there? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, my apartment. But everything was wrong. Decaying. Like it had been abandoned for years, and there was something in the walls. Moving. Growing. Like the building itself was infected. Did you see yourself? No, but I saw remnants, clothes I recognized, photos, but they were all wrong. Like someone had been living my life, but badly, wrongly. And there was a journal in my handwriting, but I couldn't read it. The words kept changing, rearranging. The only thing I could make out was the last entry. What did it say? The elevator knows, it's always known. We're just the latest to notice. He looked at me. Jenny, I think we need to stop using the elevator entirely. Both of us. Because I think each time we pass through 13, even without stopping, we're bringing something back with us. That's when we heard it. The elevator, running. But Paul lived on the 11th floor. Far from the elevator shaft, we shouldn't have been able to hear it at all. We both looked at his wall. The sound was coming from inside it. Like the shaft had extended, stretched, reached out to find us. And then, his doorbell rang. We froze. Paul checked his phone. It's 11:11. The doorbell rang again, more insistent. Don't answer it, I whispered. But Paul was already moving to the peephole. He looked through, and I saw all the color drain from his face. It's me, he breathed. But I'm wearing a hospital gown, from the old Meridian Hospital. The doorbell became a pounding, frantic, desperate, and then we heard the voice. Paul's voice, but with an underlying wheeze, like sick lungs. Please. I know you're in there. We don't have much time. The elevator is coming. The elevator is coming for all of us. The pounding stopped as suddenly as it started. Paul and I stood there, barely breathing, waiting. After 5 minutes of silence, he checked the peephole again. Gone, he whispered, but we both knew it wasn't over. We could feel it in the air, that wrongness, that sense of reality stretched too thin. We need to leave the building, I said, both of us. Tonight. Paul nodded, already grabbing his laptop, his research. I have a friend in Tacoma, we can... The lights went out. Not just in his apartment, through the window. We could see the whole building had gone dark. Emergency lighting should have kicked in, but nothing. Just darkness, and in that darkness, we heard them. The elevators, all of them, running, humming, singing their mechanical song, but the sound was coming from everywhere, the walls, the floor, the ceiling, like the entire building had become one massive elevator shaft. Paul grabbed a flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing something that made my stomach drop. The walls were changing. The paint was peeling, revealing underneath not drywall but that burgundy wallpaper. That shifting, wrong pattern. We need to get to the stairs, I said. We made it to his door. Paul unlocked it, pulled it open, and we both stepped back in horror. There was no hallway, just empty shaft, cables and darkness stretching up and down as far as the flashlight could reach. And far below, rising fast, was an elevator car, but it was wrong, old, rusty, like it had been running for decades without maintenance. Paul slammed the door shut. The window, fire escape, but when we turned, the window was gone. Just a smooth wall, that burgundy wallpaper spreading like an infection. Jenny, Paul's voice was shaking. I think the building isn't just connected to the old hospital. I think it's becoming the old hospital. The elevator sounds were getting louder, closer, And now we could hear other things. Footsteps above us. Below us, that backwards music box, voices counting in impossible numbers, and underneath it all, a sound like breathing. Like the building itself was alive, sick, dying. My phone buzzed. A text from myself. "Come home, Jenny, floor 13, room 1304. It's time." Paul's phone buzzed too. He showed me. Same message, but with his name. "We don't have a choice," he said quietly. "Either we go, or it comes to us." He was right. The wallpaper had covered 3 walls now. The room was shrinking, changing. I could smell that sweet rot getting stronger. "Together?" I asked. "Together." He agreed. We opened the door again. The elevator was there, waiting, doors open, interior lit with that warm, wrong light. We stepped in. The panel showed only one button. 13. It was already glowing. The doors closed, the elevator rose, or fell. Direction didn't matter anymore. Time stretched, compressed. I felt myself getting lighter, heavier, like gravity was negotiating with itself. Then, the ding. The doors opened. The hallway was different this time. Not burgundy wallpaper, but white tile, cracked, stained, hospital tile. The lights were flickering fluorescence, casting everything in harsh, stuttering illumination. And the smell, disinfectant fighting a losing battle against decay. 4 doors, same as before, but the numbers were different. 1301 was now isolation. 1302 read treatment. 1303 simply said failed. And 1304, home. Paul and I looked at each other. His face was pale, drawn, and I realized with growing horror that he looked thinner than he had just minutes ago, his clothes hanging looser. "Jenny," he said, and his voice was raspy. "Your hair." I reached up, felt strands coming away in my hands. Gray strands. "We're changing," I whispered, "becoming like them, the other versions." "Maybe that's what this place is," Paul said. "Not another dimension, but a process, a transformation. The hospital, the patients who saw through, maybe they didn't see another reality. Maybe they saw their own future." We were at 1304 now. The door was already open. Inside, I could see 2 rooms, Paul's apartment and mine, occupying the same space, overlapping. In one, a figure that looked like Paul but wrong, dying, writing endlessly in a journal. In the other, the me I'd seen before. Teeth now so long she couldn't close her mouth. Black eyes weeping, something dark. "If we go in," Paul said, "I don't think we come back out." "If we don't," I replied, "I don't think we have anywhere else to go." Behind us, the elevator was gone. The hallway was stretching, extending into darkness. And from that darkness, footsteps, hundreds of them, all the people who'd found floor 13 over the decades, coming home. Paul took my hand. His skin was cold, papery. "I'm scared." "Me too." We stood on the threshold, 1 foot in our world, 1 in that other place, and I understood, finally, what the elevator was. Not a conveyance, but a choice, a test. It showed you what you could become, what you were becoming, what you'd always been becoming. And it waited, patient, for you to choose. Some say we stepped through, became those dying versions of ourselves, trapped forever on a floor that doesn't exist. Others say we turned back, fought our way to the real world, escaped the building, never looked back. But I'll tell you a secret. Lean in closer. We're still standing there, on that threshold, choosing. Every version of us, every possibility, all of us, waiting, deciding, becoming. And somewhere, in a building in Seattle, an elevator rises and falls, its 13th floor button glowing softly, waiting for the next curious soul. The next person who notices what shouldn't be there. Maybe it's your building. Maybe you've seen that button, felt that wrongness. Maybe you've already made your choice, and you just don't know it yet. Sweet dreams. And remember, when you hear your elevator running late at night, when you see floors that shouldn't exist, sometimes the scariest choice isn't to look, it's to look away and wonder what you're becoming while you're not watching. Tell me, have you checked your reflection lately? Really checked? Count your teeth, look at your eyes. Feel how your clothes fit. The elevator knows. It's always known. We're just the latest to notice.